Hi, welcome back to the Weekly Why. This week we have Parsha Tisa. There's something I want to address in terms of which is probably some of you who have watched the videos consistently. You might have seen kind of a trend here. Not a trend, but some questions that might arise. So last week we were talking about the need for when we're doing mitzvot, when we're learning and when we're growing in Judaism, always remembering that it's for a greater purpose, that it's not about just for myself and just for for how it looks and its appearance. That's not it at all. It's ultimately what the reason behind it is: to grow in relationship with God, to grow as a person, etc. This week, though, I want to address almost the flip side of that. And it's kind of frustrating because it can seem as if really there's no pleasing us. There's no pleasing God. Is that last week we were talking about, well, yes, you're following mitzvahs, but make sure you're doing it for the right reason. This week we have, okay, you want to do things for the right reason, but make sure you're doing it the right way. In other words, not only is it enough to do things the right way, it has to be for the right reason. It has to be both of those. And so this week, in Parsha Tisa, I'd like to talk about the golden calf. Aaron, who was Moses' brother, was basically in charge of the Jewish people when Moses was on top of the mountain, and the Jewish people remained at the bottom. And so the Parsha appears to say, the Torah appears to say that Aaron was culpable, was guilty of bowing down to this idol himself. It says, it's actually not in this Parsha, but it's in a later Parsha in Deuteronomy. But speaking about this, it says that Hashem was very angry with Aaron. That's Deuteronomy chapter 9, verse 20. So certainly that's, if nothing else, indirect evidence to say, you know what, okay, Aaron may or may not have physically bowed down to this golden calf, but he certainly played a significant role in it. So a number of questions is, one is, how were the Jewish people really, they just got out of Egypt, they had the revelation in Mount Sinai. These would be the last people, logically, who would be bound down to a golden calf, anything other than God. And so all the commentaries say, and again, I think just using your own brain would tell us the same thing, is that these people didn't stop believing in God. These people didn't believe that God didn't exist, or that it was a hallucination, or anything along those lines. They, however, believed that bowing down to this idol would be a replacement for God. Much in the same way that they had such a great emphasis on the physical appearance of this golden calf. They put so much care and desire into it. Much the same in many ways that we put the same appearance into our synagogues today. Large, glorious, beautiful synagogues with Jerusalem stone and gold and marble and whatnot. Ultimately, obviously, that's missing the whole point here. Not comparing synagogues to the golden calf, but the whole idea is that to them, they had never had any intention of ignoring God or missing worshiping God. To them, it was a way to almost focus their admiration and their attention and their prayers to God. And however, this was a huge mistake. Why was it a huge mistake? It was a huge mistake because, one of the 10 Commandments certainly is that you can't make a physical image of God. You can't create a physical manifestation. But the whole idea is that it's a slippery slope. We talked about the slippery slopes. Is that at the time it can seem very logical. It can say, you know what, this, I'm not worshiping to the statue. Nobody believes the golden calf was a statue or was God itself. They believed it merely represented God, and that would help them focus their mind, but they were still praying to the one God. However, you do that long enough, eventually you start to forget and the lines get blurred, and eventually you're praying to the golden calf. So that's one major danger there, is the fact that it's a kind of a slippery slope down to outright idolatry. And the second one is just quite simply that it's forbidden by the 10 Commandments to create that sort of an image. And so this, I think, is the major flip side to what we talked about last week when we're saying, yeah, you need to be following the commandments, but do it with the right intention. In other words, do it for God, for the sake of growing in your Yiddishkeit. But here, we're not just talking about that. So in other words, it's not just talking about doing things for the right reason, but it's doing things the right way. And what does that mean, doing things the right way? What that means is, many things can seem very logical to us. Say, you know what, this is a great way for me to connect to God. I can grow as a person this way. I can become much more spiritual this way. But ultimately, again, that's a slippery slope. And every person, that's totally subjective, and that's just not the way we need to approach this. the best way, the only way really to achieve that true spirituality, to really grow as a Jew and as a human being, is to follow these sets of commandments. Because ultimately, otherwise, we're not really worshiping God at all. We're merely worshiping ourselves. We're saying that we know the best way to achieve spirituality. We know how to achieve it, and we really don't need God's cumbersome 613 laws getting in the way of me connecting to God. Obviously, you and I see that as completely illogical and doesn't make any sense at all. But ultimately, when we're in that situation, sometimes can be very attractive. So once again, the main idea for this parsha is that the issue of the golden calf here, it's not that the Jewish people stopped believing in God, it's that they ultimately used the golden calf as a focus for their admiration and worship of God. And they didn't intend on seeing this golden calf as a god in itself, but it could have slipped and become that eventually. But the major reason, of course, was that idol worship, the worship of God as an image, is forbidden by the Ten Commandments. But once again, the major lesson here is that last week's parsha we said you need to be doing things, the right things for the right reason. This week we're talking about doing not just for the right reason, but the right way. In other words, getting to spirituality isn't really up to you and me in terms of figuring out our best ways. It's about the parameters that God set up, because ultimately, if we're trying to connect to God, then why on earth would we ignore His suggestions for achieving that closeness, that cleaving to Him? So that's it for Parsha Ki Tisa. Best wishes, Shabbat Shalom, God bless.